So as we move through this cookie cutter world with things becoming more homogenized, spending time with a person like Dwayne Orlemann is so refreshing. Even thinking of how to introduce a person who has led such a fascinating and diverse life is a challenge. Artist, graphic designer, fencing instructor, and dancer are just a few of the many varied jobs and interests he has pursued over the years. Dwayne was raised on a farm on the outskirts of Cincinnati, lived for a period in London, and even hitchhiked across the USA. The world needs more true individuals, and I think you will all enjoy our talk with Dwayne, who was kind enough to share his stories with us.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Natty Cast. And now to your hosts, Tim Barker, Rex Stull, and Ron Thomas.
I'm super excited because for today's guest because it's such a rich artistic family history.
Yeah, because we're related.
That is correct. But between yourself, your father Clinton, my mother Nikki, the Orlemann family has strong artistic ties to the Cincinnati area. So I'm ready to unpack all of that today.
It's great. We're really happy to have you here. Tim shared a couple photographs of just, I think, when he was just wandering around your studio. I mean, just amazing.
Thank you. About a month ago, when I guess we first were thinking about this, I was sitting there going like, "Oh God, what am I going to say?"
Well, how about you can start by saying hello to everyone and introducing yourself.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Dwayne Orlemann. I've been here all my life.
What area did you grow up?
Delhi, and then to Finneytown, then to Goshen, and back to UC. And I lived in Manhattan, New York, for about 6 years.
All right.
Back in 1980 to 1986.
How did you get started? I mean, you went over to high school and things on the west side of town and grew up over there, and we're in.
Actually, I finished my high school like in Goshen, Ohio.
Oh, I live out of New Richmond, so I mean I know where Goshen is.
It's at the opposite end of the county.
Yes.
When I was in Goshen, it's a rural school. They had no art department.
Right.
So my only other option was shop.
Oh, right, sure.
Yeah.
Scene shop.
But
Or are you talking about like just regular shop? Like
learn how to take apart and put together a Chevy 6-cylinder motor.
we were just talking about that yesterday with cars and MGs.
So like
and
truly
Fords.
shop. Like we're gonna turn you on. You're gonna be an auto mechanic or
yeah, but out there, everyone you start with the Chevy 6. Everybody knows how to do those. Earlier years, I did a lot more art class, like at Finneytown and when I was in elementary school. So.
And your father was an artist.
My father was an artist. Back then we called them commercial artists. Well, now they would probably call them graphic designers or something like that. But it's just like he worked at a advertising agency design firm.
So he's like the madman, probably era of.
Kind of, but he was less, not so much.
Less Don Draper, more of the art department.
Less copywriting, more
Right.
art, more illustration, design, that kind of stuff. So it was like the copywriting part he wasn't really involved in that too much.
Sure. And he earned his. I mean, he worked basically as a commercial graphic designer, if you will, for his entire career, because he also did other types of art as well, right? I mean, there's a book around here somewhere where we have of his work.
Of Cincinnati, yeah.
Yeah, Cincinnati.
Yes, the Cincinnati scenes.
Yeah.
He was always a big fan of Caroline Williams. And when he started his own design firm, he broke away from a company called Cato Johnson, which eventually turned into LPK.
Right. Big,
So
yeah, I mean, like
he knows all these people. So it was called Omnigraphics, and it was 1974. So he's kind of wanted to do his own thing, but at the same time, he liked to keep sketching, and he was doing Cincinnati scenes. He's been going out and sketching since late 60s, 68, 69, and doing limited edition prints, things like that. But he compiled a book. It was called, Cincinnati Scenes.
Yeah, it's a great. I mean, Tim had first turned me onto it, and unfortunately, I don't think it's in print anymore. But I found one on eBay and bought it, and
I got a whole basement full.
Oh,
do you really?
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
If you'd like a new copy, go down to the Ohio bookstore.
Oh, they have them down in Ohio.
Yeah, I put some down in there.
Okay.
And we'll get back to that, but he's about to do some work for the Ohio bookstore of his own murals.
Oh, great.
That sounds
I
fascinating.
love that place. It's such an amazing place that still exists.
My favorite. You know.
Yeah.
So you're influenced by your dad.
By my dad, and again, my dad, he worked with Charlie Harper. They worked together, and they were really close friends.
Right.
And then,
Is he a Cincinnati native?
no, he's actually from West Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Originally, but
Okay.
he lived in Cincinnati his whole life. But when we were growing up in Finneytown, our houses were built together. He and Charlie bought some property, built some houses. So
Oh, wow.
I used to walk into Charlie Harper's studio every day.
Wow.
You know, we were that close, so there is a connection there, and he and my dad worked together, but Charlie went off on his own, and Dad kind of stayed with the companies he was working with. But they remained friends.
Yeah. And then you find yourself going to DAA at UC?
Yes,
Well, how did you end up out in Goshen? I'm confused how that happened.
my parents decided they wanted a farm.
Okay. Yeah.
They grew up on farms in Delhi,
Right.
and we were living in suburbia in Finneytown for a number of years, but my dad had this wanderlust. He was constantly on the move. That's how we ended up in Goshen. So they lived out there for 20 some odd years before they moved someplace else.
Right.
But I finished my high school in Goshen, but my brother and sisters, being younger than me, that's where they grew up.
They grew up out there in Goshen. Yeah, got it. Okay, and then but I mean, that clearly you have your father, you have these influences of art around you, you're interested in art, you have a talent in art.
Yeah, he was always probably my greatest influence. He would bring work home. I would go down to the studio with him all the time. Like if he'd work on Saturdays, I would go with him.
Oh, right.
So I've been kicking around agencies and studios my whole life.
Right.
Just helping the photographers, just whatever.
Would you pick up and do work on your own, or you would just generally help when you were down in those kind of places?
I would help people because I was little.
Yeah.
I would maybe sometimes sit down and I could draw or sketch if I had free time. But most of the time, a lot of times if I wasn't there, I would just go wander around town by myself, go to the movies and stuff. When they had all the movie theaters downtown.
They did.
Yeah.
So I mean, what era is this? The 60s?
Early 60s.
Early 60s.
Early 60s.
Right.
Late 50s, early 60s.
Right.
You see a lot of that influence, those film influences in his work.
Yeah.
Those pictures of
Yeah, I'm kind of stuck in the 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Yeah, well, it's good. I mean, visually, such a fantastic era of, to just capture those sorts of images.
Right.
So anyway, yeah. So you ended up at.
Yeah, I mean, people would always ask me, "What are you going to do when I grow up?" And I'd always say, "I'm going to be a commercial artist." I mean, I was never any other.
Was never a policeman or astronaut or fireman or.
No, there was a brief period right after high school that I applied to go to a military academy because I was trying to figure out what the heck to do about Vietnam.
Oh.
But I actually made third alternate to go to Annapolis.
Oh.
Okay.
All right. Well, that would.
But the whole thing, it was like, I don't know what I was thinking because I was still planning on going to UC. And I always liked the DAA building. And at that time, that's what it was called.
Yeah, we were commenting you're kind of the OG was before the P, right? Up DAAP, right? It was before the planning part.
The city planners finally got their initial one.
They got the tack on the end.
But I always thought it was a cool-looking building because it was sort of a Bauhausian modern, mid-American modern building. And it was like...
Who were some of your professors that were there when you were there?
Well, let's see. Gordon Salco became the department head when I was there for the graphic design firm. And then other teachers I had were like Vince Alvarez and Joe Bertoni and Stan Brode and Louis Rockwood and Natty Noheimer.
Natty
Noheimer.
That's a great name.
What a great
Now,
name.
were these all full-time professors, or were they people that worked in the field?
Some of the guys were professors, but the guys like Stan Brode and Joe Bertoni were like associate. They actually worked in the field, but taught at schools, but they were like associate professor type thing.
Okay.
So there was a good mix of like people that worked in the field, and then people like Gordon, who was like, sort of like Swiss design, central. So he was a department head. He ran the school.
And for some of the folks that may be listening, can you give them background on exactly what is DAAP, or was DAA and is now DAAP?
Well, DAA is the College of Design, Architecture, and Art. That's what it was called when I went there. And then now it's called, they just added a P, so it's Design, Architecture, Art, and Planning.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, because
So-
they do city planning there
Yes,
now.
urban planning.
Urban planning,
Yes.
So they and the architects are pretty much on the same floor.
But back then, I mean, and even now today, I mean, it was, there weren't a bazillion places that did that, right? I mean, that was kind of one of the...
It had a good reputation for being a design school, and it still
Does
even today it has
Yeah.
a very good reputation for graphic design and probably the other design,
Well, we have a couple people already that we've talked to who, I think Bob Orr went to DAA,
Yeah.
who's a photographer, and but
Dave?
No, Dave Lemming didn't.
Dave
but
was
also
in engineering, yeah.
CCM kind of was running simultaneously with that. As far as a specialist program on the College Conservatory of Music, and kind of I would think DAA and CCM were, in the country were kind of leaders in those sorts of.
Yeah, they weren't probably that close when I was there, but I did take some courses at CCM, usually film courses.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had a film department in our graphic design, just like here's a Bolex, a 16 millimeter Bolex, go have fun.
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were running around, making movies, and
Yeah, and I don't know that the programs necessarily work that close together, but more just in line of they were very specialist kind of, different disciplines, but kind of artistic programs, and they pulled, as you pointed out, a lot of local talent to come up there and teach, who weren't necessarily full-time professors.
that's right.
But you had teachers who came in there who were leading people in their field to instruct you.
We had some people come in after. When I first went there, the program was called Advertising and Design. In my freshman year, and I would go in there and meet these instructors, and first thing they would say is, "Do you know Nikki Orlemann?" Oh, it's his mom. It's his mom.
Okay.
Because she was there, the 2 or 3 years ahead of me.
Right.
And so she left a big impression on a lot of those teachers. And then the next thing is like, "Are you Clint's boy?"
Oh, right. Sure. They knew your mom. They knew your.
Some of these guys knew my dad.
Your dad
Right.
as well. Sure.
Okay.
Right.
And
Got
I'm
it,
going like,
got it.
yeah.
All right.
But but the second year, sophomore year, I kind of went in there, and then they said, "Everybody that's in the advertising and design program, meet in this room." So we all went to this room, and then they said, "This program has now been canceled." It's like,
Oh.
oh, great.
Okay.
And then,
This was your sophomore year.
yeah.
Oh wow.
See, freshman year, everybody took the same courses.
Sure. It's yeah.
Sophomore, you broke off into your, and that's where I first met Gordon Salco. And it was like saying it's now going to be the graphic design department, and this is where they introduced Swiss design. So it became very Swiss design, Bauhausian oriented, and we're like going, whatever you want.
Right.
So I actually got on the base, the ground floor of that program, but it has become, one of the, I think, stronger graphic design programs in the country.
Right.
And so they would bring guys in from Basel, Switzerland. We had teachers in it, and then we had some, I had some friends that decided to do graduate work, and they would go on to Basel or Yale and do some, graduate work and come back. And I think a couple of them ended up, becoming professors or teaching up at the graphic design program in later years.
Sure.
And was your work always as large in scope at that time, or is that something that over the years became like
that grew. I never, I always did some illustration work, but something that was manageable on a drawing table.
Right.
But it wasn't until probably sometime in the mid-late 70s I started getting more interested in, cinema, movies. I mean, always have been, but,
well, because you were wandering around, we know, in the late 50s going to movies when you left your dad's place down there. Right?
Yeah.
So
but I really started concentrating on, adventure movies and, film noir and anything that smacked of that time frame. I really liked 1930s, 40s type.
Right.
And
movies.
is it kind of the largesse of like the big screen and then having the image that large kind of thing?
Kind of that. It was the image. I felt if it was a little image, it doesn't look right, like a postage stamp. So it had to get bigger. So some of my first paintings that I did of like from Casablanca, I did like a series of 6, of 3 of Humphrey Bogart and 3 of Ingrid Bergman, and they were like, 3 by 4 feet, which is medium size.
Okay.
Now my small size is 5 by 6. Actually there was an article in the paper, of my dad and I, and it was by Owen Vincent. Remember, he was an art critic for the Enquirer for a while. But that was back then. And I started making bigger,
bigger works.
Bigger works. I just wanted to get people bigger. These are my larger-than-life heroes. I wanted them larger than life.
Right.
So they were, growing in size and stature. I mean, and I would pick my favorite, my favorites, like Zorro.
Right. Did you have like a favorite theater? Like, I'm sure they're all gone now, but like a favorite theater downtown that you love to go to?
The Albee.
The Albee was the one, yeah.
I mean, I went to all of them one time or another, except for the Royal, which was the...
No, where was the Albee?
Yeah.
The Albee was right on the corner of where Found Square is now, where
it's the Westin.
The Westin Hotel is.
Yeah.
The Albee Theater was right there, and then right next to it, there was a really cool restaurant called Wiggins.
Okay.
It was like the coolest, they were just high-backed booths and lots of...
That's awesome.
I now have to ask my mom.
Lots of wood paneling, and there were like old murals on the walls. It looked like maybe maybe not Norman Rockwell or Leyendecker stuff, but...
Matthew just popped a picture
Oh,
of the
wow,
Albee
there
up
it
there.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so probably right on the corner... Well, that's a very old Albee, but right on the corner, probably heading towards the Crew Tower is where Wiggins used to be.
I think I've heard my mom tell stories of, because she went to CCM. Again, it would have been 60s, earlier 60s, and of going down to Wiggins. You know what I mean? Like, that was kind of the play. It was open late, I think.
See, I used to go to all these, like, restaurants and luncheon places that all the businessmen would go to.
Right.
And, like if my dad was going to lunch, either I would go with him or I'd be, off someplace else. But places like the Cricket, the Wheel Cafe, all these places where all the businessmen would go, get your smorgasbord lunch and you'd sit there and it's just like...
Have a dirty toonie.
Yeah. And I'd be the little kid that goes along. Come on.
Instead of a martini, they'd be giving him a gin and tonic at lunch.
Or just a beer.
A beer, just a beer. Right? That's where the kids drink was it.
Right.
To me, I miss that. I miss that greatly because I used to hang around.
Wiggins. That's Wiggins right there.
I used to hang around all that stuff when I was little. And then when I was little, that's the kind of cars they had.
Yeah.
In a Wheel Cafe. And actually, when we bought the farm in Goshen. It was the guy that owned
Not
it.
the figurative.
When you bought the
farm.
farm.
Literally bought the farm, not figuratively. Yes.
The guy that owned it before us was the manager of the Wheel Cafe.
Okay.
And so when I went down there and mentioned it one day, he says, "Well, come on in, lunch is free."
Oh, good.
Well, that's
Now,
great.
did you happen to catch that on the facade of the Albee? Let's see that, Matthew.
I was just going to say, pop the Albee back up there.
The facade of the Albee that's in front of
the convention
It's at the convention center.
Yeah.
I think, that big thing at the top was long gone, but
but the pillars
the
and
pillars and the arch. Yeah.
if they could have probably put it off for about 2 or 3 more years, I think they might have been able to save that theater.
Yeah.
Because then there was probably a bigger push to save stuff like that.
Right.
I remember the Palace Theater finally got. Remember there was a big push to save the Palace because they had gone and torn down all of the old theaters in town, and in fact that facade, they're redoing the convention center, is coming off the convention center. Yeah. But at least now they're making an effort to store it because they're going to at least take the facade of it and put it somewhere more prominently in town.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, there was a whole preservation crew that came to remove it during the convention center.
Well, I was telling Tim the other day when he was looking at one of the paintings of my Zorro, and someone said, "Is that Errol Flynn?" I said, "No, that's Tyrone Power."
Cincinnati native.
And Basil Rathbone. And Tyrone Power is a Cincinnati native.
I did not know
He
that.
graduated. He went to Purcell Marion.
Okay.
Before he went out to high school. But he, so they did The Mark of Zorro in 1940. It premiered at the Albee Theater.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. Okay. Outstanding.
So it's like, little bits and pieces of history like that.
I think there's a more current picture just popped up there. It must have been maybe when they were getting ready to tear it down before the Westin went in.
Oh,
yeah. Right. And that's so if you look across Fountain Square now, that's where the Westin sits. There on the corner.
But again, I would go down there all the time with my mom and my dad, and they would just let me roam the city by myself.
You're a free-range child.
Pretty much. I mean, I was always going to like the arcade at the Crew Tower when there was all kinds of really neat shops in there. And all the shops around Fountain Square at that time were, I think, people-friendly.
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
Now they're big buildings. I say that's not people-friendly, but
it's not inviting. They've built these huge kind of edifice,
Right, so these are like all kinds
structures.
of, shoe shops and
they were designed to have mom and pop retail. I mean, it's like New York, right? They're designed to have mom and pop retail in the ground floors of these buildings that maybe have residences or offices or whatever above, but all the ground floor was set up for small business.
Yeah. Well, in this very picture, I'm counting 4 buildings, and right now there's just one building that occupies that entire block. Yeah.
And the other cool thing about the Albee, I think one of the last movies I saw at the Albee Theater was The Great Escape.
Steve McQueen.
Steve McQueen.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And you're working on
that's
one of those right now.
That's going to be a painting in a couple of years, but I'm working
really?
on that.
Now, when you paint something like that, are you doing that all from memory, or do you have
I work from photographs.
You have photographs from the movie that you work from?
I'll kind of maybe add little things of my own, but I do have a photographic reference to work from.
Okay.
But I just I went to see that movie down at the Albee with a friend of mine and his father, and there was a motorcycle there. It was kind of like the kind that Steve McQueen used, and so on and so forth. But,
like in the lobby, you're talking about for the
yeah. It wasn't the actual one, but it was Triumph is what it was.
Oh, right.
Okay.
But the reason my friend's dad went down there to see is I found out that he was in that. He was in Stalag Luft 3 when that escape happened. He was a bombardier on a B-17.
Wow.
He ended up, he shot down, became a POW. He was in that camp.
Wow.
And so he kind of told us a few stories, but he says, I was there.
This was Clinton? Who was this?
Well, it's not my dad. It was like a friend of, it was the father of a friend of mine when I was in school.
Got it.
He, and it's just a...
In my experience with people like that, too, they were usually fairly reticent about talking about it. Right? I mean, like you said, like you go see that movie and then he maybe shares a little bit, but at least that was my experience. I mean, people were...
They will talk some. My dad was like that. He would if you asked him some questions, he'll answer them. It's not that he was reticent to answer, but he didn't, glorify it or just talk about it consistently. He would just tell you about the stuff that happened because he served in the Pacific Theater.
Okay.
All my other uncles served in Europe.
Okay.
And they all came home.
Right. Well, that's saying something.
So things like that, and you get to meet older people. It's like Jim Wellinghoff, my friend, that is the woodworker, who actually gave me the ride over to get here. He was an acquaintance and friend of this man named Griffith. He was one of the last of the Doolittle Raiders who lived here in town.
Oh, okay.
One of the Doolittle Raiders lived here in Cincinnati. Wow.
Yeah, he lived to be. Oh, he died, but he lived to be like 100 and something. But he died a couple of years ago, so he wasn't the last, but he was
one of them.
Close. Yeah. He was very close, and so
Jim's woodwork is incredibly impressive.
You get stories from like that, and
well, I think it's also appreciating it too. I mean, when you grew up around older people or artists or people working in this field, but getting an appreciation for engaging them, right? Because like you said, they might not actively talk about things, but if you ask them questions, they'll tell you, they'll talk to you, they'll start to tell you stories, and you're sitting there going, wait, what?
Well, all of the people that my dad worked with that were all of a similar age, a lot of them were World War II vets.
Right.
Yep.
And I just kind of grew up with all that. I'm 75 now.
Wow, I wouldn't have guessed that.
I'm definitely a boomer.
Right. Well, so you're done at DAA.
Yep.
You graduate. So talk us through, like now they asked you what you're going to do when you grow up. You became a graphic designer. Now you've graduated. So what happens?
Then I thought, this sucks.
It feels so much like work.
What I had a good experience. Like in school, they have the co-op program where you go to school and work. So I got to work in some interesting places. I worked for 2 sessions at J. Walter Thompson in New York City, which was at that time
that was like the
biggest advertising agency in the country. And so I got to live in Manhattan for a long time. In fact, I was there when the Mets won the World Series.
Yeah, this is a great story.
69 Mets. Let's go hear the Miracle Mets story. I like it.
Dwayne, tell them about the ticker tape.
Well, we were working.
It wasn't even the ticker tape parade. It's just when they won.
Right. They were all listening to the radio.
So were you like on Madison Avenue? Was that where?
420 Lexington Avenue.
Lexington.
It was like the Gray Bar building. It butts right up against the Grand Central Station, and the Chrysler building is right on the corner.
I know the building.
That's a studio that I recorded in.
Oh, really?
They used to have an advertising agency.
So
casting house.
Everyone's listening to the game. I'm kind of working in the studio. I couldn't really care less because I was a Reds fan. So, but finally, I kind of listening. And finally, they won, and everyone was going, cheering and screaming, and people say, "Look out the windows!" And I kind of looked out the windows, and paper was flying everywhere.
So this wasn't an actual ticker tape parade. It was just
it wasn't the ticker tape parade. It was the spontaneous
combustion.
People were, and then everyone, we threw out all the toilet paper, all the paper towels, tracing pads, anything that was a paper. We're throwing them out.
Invoices,
throwing
whatever.
them out the window.
Right
Telephone books. It didn't matter. And
that would hurt, though. Wouldn't it?
People. All of a sudden, you saw all these IBM cards and all the little punch things go flying out the window. It's like, well, there goes our paychecks. But it was everywhere, and I mean, there was paper or toilet paper wrapped around the spire of the Chrysler building.
Oh wow!
And like you said, that is a true spontaneous reaction, right? I mean, nobody thinks it's going to happen. I mean, the Miracle Mets, they were called the Miracle Mets, right?
So when we came out, at the end of the day, it's like there was 3 feet of paper in the street, and they had front loaders out there picking it all up. I mean, it was everywhere.
It was
that's awesome.
Every street was covered with paper.
So you did internships up there, but did it appeal you to stay up in New York, or what was your no?
I was offered a job when I got out of school, and I said, "Well, I'll think about it," but because I was like, I don't know. And then I did a stint. I worked in London, England, for 6 months.
Oh, so that's.
And that was a lot of fun because it was like
You were the sweet spot of the music
1971, so it's sort of the twilight of the hippie era.
Yeah,
Right.
The beatniks were
Yeah, my
around
hair
over
was
there.
long. Nah, not being hippies.
Those hippies. Those were.
My hair was long. Everything was fine.
Yeah. Right.
No, what were
hanging
you
out
doing?
with Cream.
Well, I mean,
what were you doing in
people
London?
Did you see any concerts? And I went to some concerts. Well, what'd you see? I said, well, let's see. I saw Cream, and
Did you see the Stones when they were probably too
I
big
didn't
by
s-
then, right? They were.
pretty big by then. I didn't see
Yeah.
them, but which was kind of funny. The company I worked for, which actually had an affiliate here in Cincinnati. I missed this, but their original building was right across the street from Apple Records.
Oh, you mean Apple Studios?
Apple Studios, Apple Recording Studio, right.
Yeah, so they'd see the Beatles. I said, well, did you see anybody? He goes, occasionally, somebody would drive up and get out. But I mean, when I got there, a friend of mine gave me the tour. It's like, okay, here's Abbey Road, here's this, here's
Sure.
that. And I was like, okay, that's cool.
Right. Well, because it would have been just after the Beatles broke up.
Pretty much.
It's
They kind of broke up a couple of years earlier.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Right at the end of the '60s. Yeah.
It was all Yoko's fault.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I went to see Let It Be when I was in New York in '69, and I was in a theater in Jersey City in Journal Square, and when Yoko came up, the whole audience was like, boo, stuff like
Wow.
that. But again, I had a good time, and and then when my dad went off on his own, I went with him. My dad was probably the best boss I ever had.
So you actually,
awesome.
I mean,
I worked
worked
with
with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I did, I did my graphic design. I would do some, illustration work. I was leaning more towards that. But that's when I kind of started doing bigger stuff.
So I mean, there's a difference. Obviously, some of the paid stuff, somebody comes in and commissions you to do something, right? Is that?
Well, I'd get a job. It'd be more commercial oriented, but some of the stuff I got to do, sort of freelance stuff. I used to do things for the Arts Consortium
Sure.
down on Lynn Street when
Yeah.
they used to have their arts fair.
Yeah.
I did one of their posters for them.
All right.
And
Did you and your dad have anything within Union Terminal with the murals?
no,
Okay.
Well, those were tiles.
Those are tiles.
Those
Yeah.
are tiles.
they moved, but they moved them back. They moved
Yeah,
them
wow.
back to the.
They went to the airport
They went to
then
the airport when they tore down one of the concourses. They moved a bunch of them back to the.
convention
Convention
center.
center.
And now they're coming out while they're renovating, and I think they're going to find a home for most of them
Back at the
there. The other
Oh,
thing
wow.
that strikes me is when I was up at the art museum the other day, I saw the Moreaus that they had at the terrace, because they commissioned those for the terrace restaurant at the top of the Terrace Hilton.
Well, I remember that when that was one of our favorite places to go, to the Terrace Hilton to eat.
I'm sure, right? That would have been the business, right?
Supper or lunch, yeah.
Right. I mean, that would have been it.
okay.
But they actually have those murals that were up there, at least some of them up at the art museum.
Right.
Which I hadn't, I just went through there the other day and I hadn't noticed them before. I thought it was cool because I'd seen some photographs of them and I'm like, oh, they're here.
I mean,
Somebody saved
they
them.
found a hidden Charlie Harper mural at the convention center a couple of years ago.
Yes, right. I remember that. Yeah. And I think they were able to save it.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great.
Now, any other things that we'd know? Any of the other illustrations or things like that
That I did.
that you've done that we would know?
Well, I did a lot of work for Tall Stacks.
Okay.
When they were in town, the facades that they built for
Right.
the town.
The original back in '88.
Yeah,
right?
and they kind of had facades of older buildings and stuff.
Right.
Well, so Ron and I worked for, Ron did. He hired me in production company. J. Downey Productions was, kind of producing Tall Stacks. And so we all worked those Tall Stacks events as well.
Well, I painted a lot on those things. We painted them all up in the Holy Cross Monastery in Mount Adams.
Sure.
Oh.
Because
Have you been up there? They've turned that into an event center, like where the monastery was, which for years was just empty, right? Like you said, you could.
well, that's where we painted.
Right,
We used
yeah.
to paint, and people would come up and say, "Are you renovating the church?" They go, no,
No.
I'm sorry. We're just painting here.
Big open floor. We can paint flats and
Right.
Right. And,
Now, was that Ted Hendricks was working with?
Yeah, I worked
Yeah.
with Ted Hendricks a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He and I
I'm
worked together.
surprised we haven't met then because I I worked around Ted a lot.
Okay,
during those years.
I just saw Ted about a year or so ago.
Right.
We both worked at King's Productions.
So I mean,
another connection.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Right, I had a lot of friends out of school that worked for Taft Broadcasting, and I did a lot of freelance work for King's Productions, and I painted a lot of stuff for King's Island and King's Dominion.
So we were probably just kind of maybe behind you,
right.
But Ron and I both have direct connections into there. I mean, we worked at King's Island in high school running sound for the shows.
I'm trying to think of the guy that ran. I had him at CCM. But he was running.
You talking about Jack Rouse?
Yeah.
Rouse,
okay. Yeah.
I had Jack Rouse as a teacher at CCM period-wise, and then he came in charge of King's Productions while I was there for a while, and then I knew a lot of people that worked for him at Rouse Productions.
Yeah, JRA, which still exists. I actually ran into Jack on a plane coming back from Paris. I don't know, within the last year. He's still up in the house, but yeah, we knew a lot of those people who went from KP to JRA.
So
like Amy
we
Merrill
probably would
and
know
those
a lot
people.
of.
Brad Kane would be the
Kane,
one.
Yeah,
he was one of the lead designers out there.
Yeah, Brad Kane.
Brad Kane was a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Right. Yeah.
And he was a good friend of another good friend of mine, Don Holbrook.
Yeah, I remember Don. Yeah.
Sure.
Well, he lives in Tucson now.
Right. Okay.
Well, Tim had taken a couple notes, and I remember you talking about like even River City Scenic, right? I mean, so
that's what it became when Paramount Parks took over King's Productions, and then I was still working there, and they were thinking about moving it. They were going to move the scenic, the studios down to Charlotte, I think.
Yeah, where KD was.
And so at first they were down on Kellogg Avenue, down by
I remember that
Widmer,
shop.
and then they moved over to Red Bank Road, and I worked in all those places. I was just doing freelance work for them.
Because Ron and I have a big cruise ship connection as well. So we worked. I had a company that did the entertainment systems for all the Royal Caribbean ships, right? So the River City guys were out there.
You wouldn't know how many sets I painted for Royal Caribbean.
I believe
Did you
it.
ever go to the ships, or did you only do it in the ship?
I never went to Finland, but I was on a ship. I don't remember which one it was. We drove the last bit of scenery up to Bayonne, New Jersey, to get on the ship and install it. And then they were going to go out like a 24 hours out and back type cruise.
Yeah.
But that night they had a roast for Spike Lee.
So that probably was
So all those celebrities were on the ship while we were there working. So I got like, oh wow, you get on the elevator and I was like, Samuel L. Jackson, and it was just people all over the place.
The Freedom of the Seas or the Liberty of the Seas, I think, was one of those two ships.
It was one of those.
Yeah, one of those ships, because I do remember that. Well, because they started sailing out of Bayonne, right? They kind of came in there. It was pretty rough. They were.
Well, and then they went over to New York to pick people up.
Yeah.
I was like, you were working. It was late at night, and I'm sitting there getting some pizza with a friend, and I'm looking behind me and said, that is. I said, it's George Lucas.
Oh my goodness!
He's a little guy.
Yeah, right. No, that's funny. We were probably on the ship at the same time then.
That's
crazy.
And then I did a stint. I went out to Bermuda working on an installation and repair work. But I was like, at that time, I would come and go at River City, Well,
they have jobs, right? They get a gig in, and they'd probably call you and say, "Hey."
So one time Don would fire me, another time I quit, And then I get a call a couple months later from Don. He says, "What you doing?" I said, "Okay, what's the job?" He and I were very good friends. We sword fought together and all kinds of weird stuff like that.
Speaking of that, help us with that. Where does that come into play?
And by the way, there's also a dance connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're gonna have to give us a little color here on a number of things that we clearly have flown over the top of.
The fencing connection actually came from Don, and I met Don when he moved up here from Charlotte. Worked down there at King's Dominion, and we hit it off because we were kind of like compatible soulmates. We were both kind of big. We both were kind of physical. We kind of liked to play like that. And at the time, our studio was in the Rookwood building. The graphic studio was in the Rookwood building on Adams.
Up in Adams.
Yeah, we had like an upper floor. And We were up there for a couple of years.
Great building.
That's how I saw the first WEBN fireworks.
Was up there. Yeah. I grew up in Mount Adams. I love that building.
Well, we had access to the roof,
Yeah,
so we just climbed out to the
that
top
is
of the
the
roof.
spot. I mean, right there.
And we saw like the first year, and it was like, I'm surprised we didn't fall off the roof because we were tripping at the time.
Over what? There was some loose gravel up there?
Oh, the pitch of the roof is like this.
Okay.
And we're trying to climb to the very tip top of the roof. Like,
I got it. I just
getting up there wasn't bad. Getting down was like,
Right.
Dude.
It's easy to get down. It's just whether you want to be walking or not when you hit the ground.
Down.
Just slide down. But one night he just said, come with me. We're going to do something. I'm going to take you someplace tonight. And I said, well, will I like it? And he goes, yeah, I think so. I said, where are we going? He said, you'll see. So I went to the fencing club, and at that time, the Cincinnati Fencing Club. But they met at the YWCA downtown, which happened to be where Contemporary Dance Theater held classes. And I also was taking dance classes at Contemporary Dance Theater. That's how the dance and the fencing kind of merged. I was in the same place. I was, I decided.
Were you taking classes there too, Ron?
No,
Okay.
not at all. This is fascinating.
Well, I mean, when I was living in this house with all these people, when I was in school, there was a whole bunch of dancers that we knew that were associated with Contemporary Dance Theater, and they used to meet at the Immaculata Church in Mount Adams.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, but think about the footwork needed for dance and the footwork needed for fencing.
Right. So.
And that's where you met your future
It was a great place to meet chicks.
wife.
What dance or fencing?
Dancer babes. But that's so I was designing T-shirts for them and and I was helping them in shows, running sound and I became very close friends with Jefferson James, who ran Contemporary Dance Theater, and a number of the dancers.
And that's where you met your wife?
Yeah.
Or partner?
And so I continued fencing down there, and I would go to some tournaments, and Don and I would go down there regularly and go to class and stuff like that. And then I would go to dance class there on another night, which he didn't go to.
Oh, wow. That's, yeah.
But there was a summer workshop session, and so I decided to take it because I've been doing class, for a while, and I was nice and thin, and I was stretched out and flexible, and I could actually do a splits and not hurt myself. Things like that.
It's like falling off a roof. It's not getting into them; it's getting out of them and still walk, right?
So they said, we're going to have this lady come in from New York. Her name was Diane Germain, and she's going to be teaching the workshop. Okay. So I took the workshop and I think we went to some parties at the Jefferson James's house, but that's where the interest, Diane became more interested in me and I in her, and that's where we.
Like what era when is this? What?
1980.
Oh, 80. Okay. And from a work perspective, you were still doing.
I was doing the scenic art and actually working at Omnigraphics. I was kind of like half and half.
Okay.
So she moved back to New York, and then I went up to visit her once, and then she did some stints out at the University of Illinois teaching for a semester at Champaign-Urbana, and I would go back and forth to visit. But I eventually moved up there. And people would say, "Well, what brought you back to New York?" I said, I was following a dancer.
Yeah, that's right. We've all been there.
So, we lived.
I married one.
I was going to say.
So we lived up there until 1986. And she was, she had her own company, and she was a graduate of the School for the Creative and Performing Arts in New York.
Oh, right, yeah.
And she went to Martha Graham School. She danced professionally for a company called the Paul Sanasardo Dance Company, which is. They were very popular back in the early 60s. She's a little older than I am, but not much. But that's how that's sort of that dance connection came in. But I still took fencing lessons while I was in New York. I kind of went to found some fencing schools, and that's where I got into stage combat.
through the fencing.
Through the fencing, through the fencing school. I was sort of like, I said, this is really cool. And where I lived in New York was called West Beth, which is sort of subsidized artist housing. It's like right there in the West Village, right on the West Side Highway and 12th Street. There's
Probably not anymore, but
the building's still there.
Yeah, but I meant subsidized housing is probably
but
a lot more
right
money
around
now.
the block from me was HB Studios, Herbert Berghoff Studios.
Oh yeah.
And I would go there to take some lessons, and then the guy who taught it there taught at another artist acting place in New York, and I started taking lessons up there also. And I came in that one night, and some guy was like saying, "Oh man, you should have been here earlier." He says, "You see that over there? I see him over there. I said, watch Robert De Niro. He's been taking lessons here for 2 weeks." I went, "Oh yeah?" I went, well, "That's cool." I said, "What is it?" He said, "I don't know. He's going to be doing something. He's leaving tomorrow. He's going to South America to do some film."
Oh yeah.
The Mission.
The Mission. That's right.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And
so
then
I got to. I saw Robert. I didn't get the fence with him, but I saw him.
And then you're heavily involved with fencing. What were you teaching, or what's the?
Well, I did more stuff. I would take a regular fencing class in the afternoon. I would do kendo and then stage combat. They were all like within walking distance of where I lived. And I used to I worked with a guy, or was taking some classes with a guy named Alan Sudduth. He had a group in New York called Fights R Us. He mostly did stuff for television shows.
So this is now stage combat stuff. Yeah.
So I was kind of doing sport, Japanese, and stage. But when I was moving back here, they were giving me some names to get contact with. And there was guys that worked at NKU, and that's how I got to know more about the Society of American Fight Directors, which is a nationwide, organization, and they have people teaching. They teach workshops all over in the colleges and stuff, and I took several of their national workshops and got got my accreditation as a actor combatant and things like that, and had a lot of fun.
Did you work on any films, or was it mostly theatrical stage
No
stuff?
films, mostly stage. When the ensemble theater, and I was kind of doing stuff for the ensemble theater here in town, and the director of the show, his name is Drew Frazier. He's directed other stuff, I think, for the Shakespeare Festival and ensemble theater, but he lives, in northern Kentucky. I met him, and the first thing they were doing, like in '93, I think, was Zorro.
Oh, that's right.
Wheelhouse.
It's right back into. He's like, I got Zorro. I got
full
this.
circle.
I was working. I was giving lessons to the guys who were like, the guy who was going to play Zorro. I was kind of working with him and helping him with sword work.
Zorro was originally a Cincinnati native. I don't know if you knew that.
The Fox. But I got to, and then I got to know Drew because he was a fight master with the Society of American Fight Directors. And so I got to work with the people, and I got to, work in rehearsals and help with, a little bit of the choreography, and, just kind of be backstage a lot.
And you were just basically, it sounds like, drawn to this kind of the arts, really. I mean, it merges all these things
I'd already
together.
Painted the Zorro painting, so we hung it up in the lobby.
Well, Matthew's got up there.
We hung that up in the lobby of the ensemble theater during the show.
Is it still there? I mean, did you give it to the? Did you donate it to the ensemble theater?
I don't give anything away.
That's why I said donate.
Actually, it's back at my building in the studio, but the Cincinnati Film Commission, their offices are in my building, so it's right next to the Cincinnati Film Commission's office.
Ah, okay.
So, that's great.
So, and are you working with any fencing? I thought there was something that now coaching or is present currently that you.
Yeah, I'm getting back to the theater stuff, but I have, I was like at the ensemble theater. I was in Robin Hood. I played Little John.
Oh wait, so now you're getting on the stage doing.
Yeah, I'm on the stage. I'm doing several things. I'm painting sets, or I'm helping choreograph, or being a fight captain or something.
Or maybe all of it. You could do the pre-show set, and then you can get in costume and go out.
I've done it, but and that was, they usually hire me to fight. And for Zorro, for Robin Hood, I was like Little John. And so I actually got, to choreograph my own fight. The quarterstaff fight between Robin and Little John on the bridge or on the log. So I got to choreograph that. And then another show we did there was called Wild Oats, which was a Western.
Oh, right.
And again, I was hired to be a bad guy. I was Angel Eyes.
Okay. All
but
right.
mostly it was for ballroom brawling.
Sure.
Barroom fights.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then I did a show up at the Playhouse called Dark Paradise a number of years ago. It was a cowboy western vampire thing that was, I think to this day it is still known as the show that shall not be named.
Oh, yeah, okay.
At the Playhouse.
The Macbeth of the Playhouse.
Oh, it was weird. But it's like, and again, I helped Drew choreograph, some of the stuff and work with the actors, and I was the fight captain, and I was the armorer because there was a lot of guns being shot, and I was one of the bad guys.
Right.
And I had a couple of speaking lines, and then the last show I did out in Ogden, Utah, we were doing a Zorro out there, and I met Drew, and Drew says, I met him at Arnold's, and Drew said, "Are you busy?" I said, "Well, what's the show?" He goes, "Zorro." I said,
"Can't get away from it."
And I'm going like, "Where?" He goes, "Ogden, Utah." And I go, right. "Really?" He says, "You're interested?" I said, "Well, how much?" He said, $1,500. I said, "I'm in."
That's it. That's all it takes, right?
So on that one, I helped choreograph. I was the fight captain. I played a part. I was Sergeant Gonzalez. So I got to play a comedic fight. And again, I got to choreograph my own fights between Zorro and me, but I helped everybody else.
Right. Sure.
We were talking about it when we lunched the other day that when in '86 I was at the Minneapolis Children's Theater doing King Arthur and the Magic Sword, and I was playing Arthur, and B.H. Barry was the fight choreographer. So we were shooting his name around before.
So you had to learn.
Oh yeah,
some of these
we're doing like broadsword choreography.
And so I was other people out there, and other people came. They'd audition and stuff at various places, and people said, "Well, you're coming from Philadelphia or New York or something like that," but they're all like members of the society, most of them. And they come to me and they go, "Well, where did you audition?" And I went, "Arnold's Bar and Grill."
A hamburger and fries.
Yeah. It didn't mean anything to anybody else other than the people that were from Cincinnati.
Right.
Yeah. Would you say that when you are teaching or you are choreographing a fight for a show, is there any particular move that's harder to teach than another, in your opinion? Or getting an actor to get it in their body?
Not really. You got to work. I think the hardest things to do are slaps.
Yeah.
Why? Because people always say, "You can take a slap."
Right.
It's the difference between hurting somebody but not making it look fake, right? It's
like, can you take a slap or can you take a punch to the face? It's like, but the only problem with that is if you're doing like a live theater, and you got to take a slap every night and twice on Sunday.
Yeah.
And you're doing like a 6-week run. It's it gets pretty old pretty fast.
Sure. And I suppose it's make it look natural too, right? It's without making it look staged.
It's all based off misdirection and deception.
Mm-hmm.
That's how stage work goes, so
sleight of hand.
Nobody gets hurt,
Right.
Yeah.
But also that it doesn't just make it look fake, that it feels real, but that, like you say, it's not hurting anybody.
First time I showed up at the SFAD, national workshop, and the first 2 years I did it down at Memphis State, and the last time I was out in Las Vegas at the University of Nevada. And it's a 3-week workshop. And the first workshop we went into, And the teacher's talking. He says, if you come here to learn how to fight, no, go home. We're not teaching you how to fight. We're teaching you how to act a fight.
Right. Yeah.
I said, but I'm a method actor.
Well,
I got to learn how to fight first.
It's also interesting too because I was doing a season at Stratford with the young company, and one of the fight choreographers, it was a kick to the crotch.
Yeah.
Now, there's two different. There's some, and you can please chime in on this, to the inner thigh.
Oh, your target is here.
Your target's there, and you're actually kicking through. So you're like the foot would kind of be more towards your buttocks.
Right.
Yes,
yeah.
you're not.
You see the foot on the back side of your
yes.
butt.
Yes, but then this guy though, John, he wanted the kick to go to the crotch, but to pop it. And I mean, so it was like exactly. I was like, man, I don't know about this.
We were taught that one. You kind of kind of set yourself up so you're exposing your thigh.
Yeah.
And you're doing it in a manner obviously so the audience can't see the
angle.
The angle. Yeah. And they want you to do a little snap kick, so you're using the top of your foot. And you're doing a little snap kick, so you get a
exactly.
You get that, and then you have to react. I was like.
Yeah, but that's the thought. Like this, I was like,
you're talking about like an actual tap
to come. Well, all on the person to just you're not. Yeah, you're not.
That's like margins for error here. I'm not sure that the pay is enough at the young
wear codpiece like Cameo.
The thing would be like,
yes.
They say, okay, we're going to practice. They say, dress left. It's like, okay. Because we're kicking you on the right side.
That's not good at all. Stage left, house left. You know what?
Right.
Stage right.
Dress left. Dress left, right. But too much thinking involved.
But a few times it was like, ooh.
Yeah, that's not fun.
That's not good.
But now to me, when people when I choreograph, groin kicks, I won't do it.
Yeah.
Why? Because I don't think it's funny.
Well, right. Yeah, exactly.
But when you're on stage and everyone does it, wham! Oh, yuck! That is so much fun to watch.
Hey, Benny Hill made a career out of it.
I don't think so. Let somebody else do it.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, I mean, it's that type of stuff, and and either you're napping, making slaps, or actually maybe light contact, but what they call reverse energy.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of hitting something like that, you're hitting
So
pulling off.
I saw in the notes here, and it just struck me, and I have to ask you about it. Hitchhiking across the United States of America. Tim had taken that down as just a note with no context around it at all. So I just thought I'd throw it out there and see if you have any, I don't know, can you tell us about it?
Remembrances of that? That was in 1976 or 7 or something like that. A friend and I decided we're going to hitchhike.
So you set out. It's not like your car broke down. You set out to hitchhike.
My friend says, I got a friend who lives in San Diego. I was like, well, let's go to San Diego.
Starting from
Cincinnati.
Wow.
And so we started out. I mean, I made arrangements with him. He was somebody I went to school with at UC. And he says, but the big kicker was like, can I bring my girlfriend? And I'm going like, huh?
Wait, so there's three of us.
Me and him and his girlfriend. Talk about lonely nights on the road.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. But what was cool about that is that, we got interesting rides, but somewhere out north of Des Moines or something like that, we got picked up by a school bus full of people that were actually going. They started in Washington, D.C., and they were going to end in Eureka, California.
Oh.
And so they picked us up, and this guy converted the school bus to sleep in, and there was, about 6 people, and they were like, they would fix food, and they would go to KOA campgrounds and spend the night and stuff like that. And
similar age to you, these people? Were they of similar age?
Similar age, I think.
Yeah.
I think we're all similar age. But what happened is that we were like thinking like, maybe if we ask these guys, they'll take us all the way out to California.
Well, right. I mean,
they're going.
They're on their way.
Yeah.
Right.
They agreed. They said, we'll help pay for the gas. He says, you don't have to. It's already paid for. You just buy food or stuff. And it's like, all right.
So where was this pickup starting? Where did
In
you mention
Iowa?
it? In Iowa. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we were just gonna try to get to California, but they decided, no, we're going up to go through the Badlands in South Dakota. We're going to Mount Rushmore. We're going to Devil's Tower. We're going through Wyoming. We're going to Yellowstone Park and Jackson Hole and Crater Lake. We're going like, wow, this is cool. And so somewhere in the Dakotas or I don't know, Wyoming, but he got a big hole in his muffler or the bus. And so he was going to buy, he had money, so he was going to just go buy a new muffler. And he goes, we can fix that. So we got some,
Because if it had a 6-cylinder engine in it, you definitely could have fixed that.
Exactly.
We know from your training at Bethel High School. Sorry.
I said, just give us some like high C cans and some, worm, clamps. And we scooted under the bus and seized the hole in the muffler, and we stuffed the aluminum foil and wrapped these cans around it and tightened it up, and it was just like good as new. That cemented the deal.
Well, that got you
That got us.
Definitely
That was
staying.
definitely.
Your ticket now
That was our
stamped.
definite ticket to California.
Oh, wow.
And then from then on, he would be asking me questions about, fixing the bus or whatever problems, small problems we could handle.
Right.
So I got to see all of this stuff I wouldn't have gotten to see, and it became very much a Ken Kesey electric Kool-Aid acid test bus ride.
Right.
That's what it turned into. It was like,
Your own version of the Yellow Submarine.
Man.
I was like, oh man.
It's a lost art form. You can't. That just can't happen.
And then
again.
we got off at Eureka, and then we hitchhiked our way down to San Francisco, and then down to San Diego, and then we ended up like in Flagstaff.
Oh, so you just kind of kept turned
on
left
our way
and
back.
kept on your way back.
We were gone for a couple of months, I guess.
And you hitchhiked all the way back as well?
The return.
No, we were so beat up. He had serious ankle and arch problems, and I'd fallen and really tore up an arm.
But by the way, has the girlfriend made it all the way with you? Or
She went home.
We lost her in Tulsa.
She went home after we got to I think San Diego.
She tapped out. She's like, this is enough for me with these two guys.
Yeah. So now, and to kind of bring it currently, we were talking about the Ohio bookstore. I think this is really cool because especially we have some of the pictures that you were telling me about.
Right. Well, there's a picture of your mom right in front.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a commission he had for
that's a
rear window,
which is almost finished.
But yeah, I'd love for you to tell the listeners about this Ohio bookstore commission.
Well, the people at the Ohio bookstore know me, the owner, and over the years, because I've frequented them often. And so they're familiar with my work, but where they've really seen my work is I painted a mural in Jeff Ruby's steakhouse, the first steakhouse, up here on 8th Street. And which I think they probably moved the mural down to.
Is it down to the new? Because they also have it now as an event center, right? What was the old Ruby Steakhouse?
That was the
I know the mural. I mean, it's
the mural.
Just an amazing mural. Yes.
Yeah.
Because it was like when I got to the assignment with Jeff Ruby, he showed me something that looked a little bit like this, but it had this Tamara de Lampica, style. He says, "Can you paint that?" And I go, "Yeah, yeah, I can paint that." He said, "Well, I'll give you the job," but I said, "I'm going to paint it, but I'm going to paint my own. I'll leave it I'll make it in this Lampica style. But I'll design this mural in myself."
So you either way, because I know it's still an event center, so I wasn't sure whether they left it there
It's not at the event center. They told me they moved it to the...
Because I haven't been into the new place,
They told me they moved it to the steakhouse down on Fountain Square.
Yeah, the new one,
yeah.
But I painted it on canvas so that it could be
easily moved
off the wall. But the funny thing about this is that I got Jeff Ruby and the art director would come to the studio, and it's like he was notorious for bossing people around, but I'm bigger than he is, so he was in my place, so he did.
Well, there you go.
He wouldn't say anything, and he would look at it, and it was pretty far along, and he goes, "Yeah, I like it." He says, "Except for one thing." And I go, "What?" He says, "The face on this girl here." He says, "Reminds me of my ex-wife." I said, "Change it."
Okay.
Can you change it? I said, "That's a legitimate request." I can do that.
If you know the story of Jeff Ruby and his ex-wife, right? I mean, she pushed him out of a moving car. Oh, no,
I didn't know that.
She almost killed him. I mean, she opened the door and shoved him out of a moving car.
Wow.
Oh, he's a character.
He is. One of my first jobs, I was still in high school, and they were doing, remember La Boom and Waterfront that was down there, that restaurant, it was a Ruby restaurant, was hanging ceiling speakers and doing the sound system, and Smith All Electronics, which was up there on Vine Street, right? You know, he was doing the stuff in there, and I was working up there, and we did that for Ruby. So that was my first introductions. You know, he was clearly around and very active in that whole process. So you did edit the face then? You did modify the...
Yeah, I just not the face. I changed the face. But anyway, the guys at the Ohio Bookstore had gone there. So they asked me to paint something in their stairwell of the Ohio Bookstore.
Okay.
Well, that goes up 3 stories.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's multi-stories going up. Yeah.
And they're familiar with my style. In fact, I think I showed them some stuff that I've done, and they were, you know. And I said, "Well, I don't do stairwells anymore, you know." But I'll tell you what I will do, you know, do. And they kind of agreed to it. So there's a area they just fixed up. I don't know if you're familiar with the Ohio Bookstore.
Yeah, I've been in there many times. Yeah.
Well, if you go in towards the back and you go the steps up to the mezzanine where the Civil War section is, and then below it, they've just, in the last year or so, they've kind of made that into a better children's, you know, classic, you know, better children's book thing. And they want something to go on just above it, like there's a railing there attached to, that'll be the first piece we'll do.
Oh, nice. I mean, they just don't exist anymore, stores like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be right. I mean, I go in.
The last couple ones, Duttenhofer's closed their doors.
Yeah.
And then there was a place in Mount Lookout Square called the Dust Jacket, and they're gone.
Yeah.
And then all these other famous bookstores like Kids Books and Bertram Smith's Acres of Books. There's like,
I mean, even the big mega stores then struggled against Amazon. So the fact that her Ohio bookstore has survived, you know, kind of all of that, now where it's back.
Well, they tell me that it's making it. You're surprised how many younger people are coming in here to browse and look, because it's the only one left.
You mentioned being a Reds fan when you talked about the Mets. Are you still a Reds fan? Do you still follow baseball at all?
A little bit, but I mean, the heyday was 1975.
If you could slap on a Reds jersey, what player would you have? What name on the back?
Johnny Bench.
Nice.
Rock and roll.
Yeah.
I met him down at Jeff Ruby's.
Oh, right.
Along with Pete Rose, and that night, Oscar Robinson and
Big O.
Oh, the Big O, yeah.
Boomer Esiason was there. It was the opening of this restaurant.
Nice.
Okay.
Wow.
And so I got invited.
So you're hanging out on cruise ships with Spike Lee and Sam Jackson, and apparently Fight Clubs with Robert De Niro, and
I was really tempted in the elevator with Samuel L. Jackson, but I thought I better not.
Whoa! What were you gonna say to him? What were you thinking of saying to him?
I said, I was going to say, I'm a mushroom cloud land. I'm the guns at the never. I better not. I was going to lay all my Pulp Fiction stuff on.
The NattyCast is proudly brought to you by Pago Lago Productions. The show is hosted by Tim Barker, Rex Stull, and Ron Thomas. Produced and edited by Matthew Lake, and associate produced by Ethan Spanja. Special thanks to Sadie Kern at Pop Gun Flow for the graphics, and to Brando Triantafilu for the original theme song. Feel free to follow us at @the_NattyCast on Instagram, or head to our website, thenattycast.com. You can get this show wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next time.